The person you spend the most time with in your life is not your parents, it is not your siblings, brother, your sister. It's your wife, it's your partner or your man. And I think there's a stat out there, you can look it up. Like everything decreases, time spent with those other people, but time spent with your partner obviously is always high. It's the most important person in your life. So therefore, putting in some effort may be something worth considering. Welcome back to Catch the Zenith, the podcast where I talk about business and high performance. I'm Nicola, 27-year-old and currently working in sales. And today I want to record another episode of Zenith Reflections. Now, if you are new here, Zenith Reflections is a series where I reflect upon my week. I attempt to articulate ideas I had in my mind or things I thought about and I'm not yet perhaps capable of articulating them. And here I'm doing that, or my attempt of doing that. I share with you some ideas, some lessons learned, things I could do better, things perhaps I'm doing good. It's a way of trying to avoid doing mistakes twice while at the same time learning. And today I want to discuss 4 main themes or main topics. And the first one is a mental model called Great, you did well, now let's do it again. So let me start with a quick story. Roughly 3 weeks ago, I started a new job in a sales position at a B2B software startup, a Swiss B2B software startup. And my role is I'm a sales development representative, which is a fancy word for a guy who sets appointments or demos or meetings with prospects. And what we do in those meetings is we do a little bit of discovery, we understand their situation, we are selling to companies, B2B, and then we also show our product. But my main focus as a setter or SDR, sales development representative, is simply to set appointments. And I started, as said, 3 weeks ago. We had in the beginning onboarding. We got introduced to the processes of that company. And my main KPIs there, or my goal per month, is to book at least 15 meetings per month. That's the goal. That's what my work, that's why I'm there. And after the onboarding, although the onboarding is still a little bit going on because there are many different areas to cover, I would consider that as a decent start when it comes to booking meetings or demos. And when we started cold calling, because we use cold calling as the main means or the main approach to book meetings. So we call potential clients or customers. And on my first cold call, during my time of working there, I booked directly my first demo. And then the week after, that was on Friday, basically the second week. And then on last week, I booked 10 demos. And I would consider that as a reasonable, decent start. But it made me also, and I was happy about it, obviously. It was, I think, also the company record so far. But it made me also think about, okay, yeah, that's okay. You did more or less a good job. But now, let's do it again, but more and better. And this framework of whenever you achieve a certain level of success, whether it's at work, you finish a project, you submit your project, you give your presentation, and then you tell yourself, after maybe celebrating a little bit, okay, now let's do it again, but better and more. And this gives you this, because there's this proverb from the Bible, I looked that up with ChatGPT, that says, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And my interpretation of that is, if you are too happy, too proud on yourself about a certain achievement, after that you will fall perhaps, or some not so good things will come after that. And in order to avoid that, I try myself to remember that it's okay to celebrate, be happy about it, but also to remember that, okay, now let's figure out means how you can achieve that again. How can you do better? How you can do more of it? I'm not saying I will always achieve that. Perhaps I will do less next week because 10 is quite high and I started with some I had some lucky punches perhaps. But now try to figure out means how to do good and figure out process how to improve, because I'm still pretty early on in my cold calling days. So basically in sales, I have done sales before in my own businesses, but cold calling I've never done in that format, and especially in a, let's say, in a B2B software setting. So this is a new thing for me, and I like that, and I like to become good as quickly as possible. Therefore, I try to read books or one particular book on that topic, learn from my peers how they are doing, and as fast as or as quickly as possible to pay down my ignorance debt. And then I define ignorance debt as your stuff you don't know about it. And I want to get rid of that as quickly as possible, that I know what I'm talking about, and I want to build up that skill. Now, the main takeaway here is whenever we achieve a certain level of success, in my case, it was, okay, I book a certain amount of meetings, it was a company record, perhaps per week, whatever. This is nice to have, and I'm grateful for that I had the setting together with my team who supported me on that journey, that I achieved that. But now it's important to reflect and say, okay, next week, let's figure out a plan how we can achieve the same result again, or at least come close to it, and which things we can do better. Next one, see life in seasons like a lion. So Naval Ravikant, successful entrepreneur, investor, the founder of AngelList, talked about that we human beings are not made for repetitive donkey work. We are more wired to act like lions. So we hunt, then we eat what we hunted, we reassess, and we set a new target, and we hunt again. So we more have those sprints in our lives, those breaks, and again we sprint. And quick story here from my journey. So I had a pretty intense period over the past, presumably since 2019. That was when I got into working a lot, enjoying work, and getting a lot of reinforcement from work. And then roughly after last year in summer, after finishing my last exam semester at the University of St. Gallen master's degree, I had a period where I took on a new project. I wanted to build a software startup. And however, during that time, I had some other struggles, and I then, after half a year working on that project, we ended that. Was a good learning so far, but it didn't work out how we wanted. And I more or less slowed down a little bit, did a little bit less work than I used to do before, like working those crazy long hours. So I took a little bit a break, although I still had enough work to do on some projects I pursue, like working at Swisspreneur, a non-profit organization in Switzerland, or my podcast and my newsletter, etc. But I had, let's put it like that, a little bit of break. I gave myself a little bit space. I was working less. But now it's time to ramp up the speed again. So I started 3 weeks ago in this new job, and now I'm back at the same pace, and I really enjoy it because I really operate pretty good when I go all in. I work pretty intensely. I consider myself also as to a certain degree as an extreme person. So I like to go all in and do things pretty intensively. That's how my brain is wired. I've looked at the evidence over the past 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and I've seen this common pattern that when I'm hyper focused on, or a clear focus on one project, I can go all in. I can work for months, for years, pretty hard on one single thing, or at least on those major projects. Work those 12 hours Monday to Friday, also working on Saturday. Today is Saturday when I'm recording this episode. And I really enjoy that because it gives my life some kind of meaning. And I like this challenge, gives my life meaning to a certain degree. And for this season of my life, and this is now, or let's start like this is basically now, this is a new season. After some reassessment, this is again a new season. And that's the main point I wanted to make here. Life doesn't need to be always the same, monotone. There's more intense periods, less intense periods. There are periods where we say no to a lot of social, quote unquote, obligations, and there are other seasons where we say more yes. And there's no, I think, perhaps no right or wrong, but that's another discussion which I don't want to cover here. But life feels more enjoyable if I behave like this. And it's okay to work hard for an extended period of time, to have those sprints, and then to go into a mini retirement. I think Tim Ferriss covered that in his book 4 Hour Work Week, that you should or you can structure your life with intense work periods, and then multiple times throughout the years, or some period throughout the years, you take like a mini retirement, rather than, as opposed to just have the retirement once you're 64 years old and you don't work anymore. So you have those constant little retirements, intense work periods, and you switch between those two states. And that's basically similar to seeing life in seasons and behave like a lion. And sometimes I feel like, yeah, there are not a lot of people approaching that, and that's okay. And that is actually a sign that I'm on the right path. If I'm not doing everything that everybody else is doing, because what I've observed from people that achieved extraordinary things is they don't follow the crowd. They have the courage to stand up and say, you're everybody wrong and I'm right and I'm doing this. But not only that, but also that they are willing to do stuff, to work those 12-hour shifts, to crush the gym, to build up a great family, to do things that a normal person wouldn't do. And sometimes it feels quite lonely if you see a lot of people not doing what you are doing. But we can actually flip that and see that as a sign that we are on the right path. If we are going to the gym, whereas your friends or some folks, they are going out to destroy them with alcohol, you're on the right path. Or if you're eating a healthy diet, but everybody around you is eating junk food, that's a sign you're on the right path. And it feels pretty lonely. But at least in my case, it proved to be, in most cases, just you're on the right path. All this to say that seeing life in seasons with intense work periods and periods where we take a break, I found pretty conducive to my life, to a productive content life. Next one. Third topic. Short form content is in many ways not conducive to a productive life. Let's start with a quick story. So around 2018, 2019-ish, I got into my being more restrictive when it comes to the information I consume. It started with social media. I think for a period, I deleted my Instagram, my personal account, which I deleted that completely. Although I have now Instagram, but I use it in a more professional setting with podcasts, etc. But I became more conscious about what kind of information I let into my brain. I also restricted news. I rarely or basically completely got rid of news, or to a large extent. Especially those, 1, 2, 3 minute news articles that are not very in depth and they leave you with this empty space, you don't know more or less. Especially of that, I got rid of it. And I try to substitute that with more long form content. In other words, content that is either written in a book, or I can listen it in a podcast, but as few as, or a longer YouTube video, but not in a short form content setting, because I found myself, whenever I consume quite a lot short form throughout the day, I see myself less stable, less focused, more impulsive. And having said that, and having observed that I'm behaving differently to a certain extent, I want to restrict it. So I restricted that, and life was way better. If you're not knowing what's going on, like on the world right now, life feels way more enjoyable. And again, some people, I covered that before in this podcast, tell them, yeah, you don't have Mitgefühl. What is the right word in English? Let me quickly look that up. Compassion, I think, is compassion is the right word. People will say you don't have compassion for what's going on. And that's not the point, to be honest. Because the point is, if there's happening in a car accident, and I would read every single day about car accidents and all the terrible things that are going on this planet, I think that's a pretty miserable existence. And I don't want that for my life. And I believe when consuming books, podcasts, first, I'm a way more productive citizens of this society. I may try to make this planet better within the realm of what is in my control. And I also understand way better why humans behave in a certain way, how they behave during COVID, for instance. If you read books, if you understand the behavioral psychology, for instance, if you read about that in books, and it gives you a better understanding why people act in a certain way, why they behave, why they made that decision. And like that, I feel like understanding way more what's going on this planet. Although I don't pick up on those day-to-day news articles and what's going on. I don't care about that. And then, so I had a pretty long period where I more or less followed that quite strictly. And then recently, I mentioned last summer, I had a little bit shift after this period of working pretty hard at university, picking up this new software project. I fall a little bit into that tendency sometimes, pulling up YouTube, and although watching still long form content to a large extent, but also sometimes watching those pretty stimulating shorts, whether it's about politics, debates, somebody gets, how they say it, roasted or something like that. And I did that now for some months, and I realized that this really, it's just terrible in so many ways. One way how this is expressed is my ability to focus decreased a little bit, because I would consider myself as in the maybe 1% or even higher of people, how long you can focus. And I realized it's getting a little bit harder, although my focus level were still pretty high. because I had days where I focus for, it's crazy, like 8, 10, or 12 hours, and I'm staring in my like computer, but I trained myself doing that by reading books, by working with the work sessions, etc., and then it's possible. But I'm saying that I realized that I got a little bit more impulsive, focused, decreased, was a little, didn't feel well about it. Also, my mind wasn't that quite how it used to be. So I, together with starting this new job and seeing that as a start of a new season in my life, I said, okay, now it's gone again. You don't want to know what's going on in the world. And quite frankly, all I'm now focusing on is working, gym, and some other things, which maybe I will cover later, but it's pretty easy now what I need to do on a daily basis. Life became, again, way more simple. I maybe listen to podcasts, I read books, but again, I don't know. I'm really now in German we say, du lebst hinter einem Berg. You live behind a mountain. In other words, you don't know what's going on, and you're a pinfoil head. No, just kidding. Um, Life feels way more enjoyable because you don't see everywhere the negativity, or at least a little bit less. And you try to be a productive human being by doing your work good, things that are under your control. Because I read this awesome book, you see it somewhere uh, behind me, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the author, Stephen Covey, talked about having two circles, to put it simply. The inner circle is your circle of control, things that are under your control. So whether you work, your work is under your control, your health to a certain degree, your behavior, the things you do on a daily basis. But then there's an outer circle, and that's the circle of concern. That's maybe topics like what's going on in the world, wars, political stuff, whatever. Things that are not under your direct control. Maybe a little bit, but very little. So let's put it as your circle of not under your control, your circle of concern. And by focusing on your circle of control, the more you focus on, okay, am I working out? Am I eating a healthy diet? Do I sleep properly? Do I do a good thing at work? Do I prepare for my meetings? Do I do the daily outreaches like in my case in sales? I believe I'm focusing on the circle of control, and the more I focus on that circle of control, the bigger it gets. And you feel like you're holding the steering wheel of your life. You have it under your control. And my caveat here, still things are going south and are maybe not under your control or can go terribly wrong. But at least you're making an attempt on focusing on stuff you could perhaps do better. All this to say that short form content, especially when, and there can be perhaps some useful things about it, but I just thought a lot of things that I'm then consuming is out of my control and making me not a better human being. So now I'm in this new season. I cut out most information, and the interesting thing is when you're not more restrictive about the information you let into your brain, but conversely focusing on content you carefully curated or selected, you're way more likely to retain the information, to remember what you've read, to remember what you've listened to, as opposed to consuming 1,000 pieces of content where after doom scrolling for 3 hours, you don't know nothing about it. You can't remember anything, or maybe one piece of short form content. At least that's how it was in my case to a large extent. So life feels again pretty good. It also used to feel good before, but cutting out news, short form content, that political stuff that is so stimulating for my brain, but not really helping me in any way, or I don't see a big utility, yeah, life feels better. Focus on the circle of control. And there's a nice quote by Mark Manson. He said something like, lots in the world is a war for attention, and our minds are the battlefield. And I think let's conclude that third theme, third topic I want to cover with this quote. So, short form content, make sure to not consume it. And I'm talking here to myself. Next one, which is quite a personal one. It's about dating and how I attempt to find my wife, my life partner, the person I want to die with, basically, or be together until we die. A quick story. So, I had a relationship that lasted over 7.5 years, and I'm very grateful for that beautiful time. Unfortunately, we broke up recently, and I said I'm quite grateful for it, or very grateful for it, and will always keep this person in my heart, that's for sure. But now I find myself in this situation where I want to find a woman I want to be until the end of my life, until the end of our lives, basically. My life partner. And I went into that topic a little bit deeper, or basically, sometimes I consume content about how to find your life partner, how to have a good relationship. And I came across Leila Hormozi's story about how she found her man, Alex Hormozi, who she married. And what her approach was to find someone in her life who's really her partner was the following. She read the book Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power. And there's a chapter where he talks about you should list out, and that's just a gist, you should list everything you want the other person have. Characteristics, things that are important to you. The person is loyal, behavior traits, things the person don't do, no-goes, etc. And you create some kind of hierarchy list, a list of things, an entire list, and then you try to which things are more important than others. Like there are maybe some non-negotiable top 3, and then are some less important things that you could forgo in the worst case, that you could say, if it's like that, it's not that important to me. But you create some kind of hierarchical structure, a list of items that are important to you in the other person, or for what you're looking for. And she did something similar, and I bought the book, I just read that chapter, if I remember correctly, I think 3-ish months ago. And then what she did was she went on many different dates. So she had this list, and after each date she had, and she went with the approach of having a large N, or a large number of prospects, of potential life partners. So she went on many dates, and after each date she went through that list and assessed, does this person more or less fit into that, or fit to me? It's a good fit. And if yes, she would go on a second date, perhaps. That's what I presume. And if not, she went on another day with someone else. And she did that very methodical, very systematic, and like that she ended up finding Alex Hormozi. And my main takeaway here is, and I think she also said something similar like that, most people just end up with the first best person they met. So maybe. And there are some exceptions. It's beautiful. Some people find their big love in kindergarten. Maybe that's a little bit early, but in primary school, in college, wherever it might be, and they end up being together the rest of their life. And that's beautiful, and more power to you if you're in that situation. But there are also, that's what I presume, many people that just end up being together with the first best person they met. So they didn't really put it in a lot of effort. Like when we apply for a job, I would presume that a lot of people put more effort into preparing their CV, or at least a large amount of effort into that, to find a good job, to get the job, etc., as opposed to spending time on finding the life partner. And I just recently watched that's when I was still consuming short form. I think about a few weeks ago, I watched a video of a guy interviewing a billionaire, and he said that make sure, or the takeaway was, make sure to find a wife. If you're a man, find a wife who loves what you do. Life is way more enjoyable. You can do together the stuff you both like. And I also remember Gary Vaynerchuk, entrepreneur, saying, I think he said that, you either want in your wife a cheerleader, so she cheers you on, she supports you on your journey, she makes sure you have everything you have, or you want to be in the same boat, so you want to do the same thing. Maybe you run your business together, you work in the same job. Pick one. But if this person doesn't love what you do, always jacks you down, say do less, don't do that, that can cause some friction. And I found that a quite helpful framework, that either I want a cheerleader or I want a wife that plays the game with me. And with that, I'm simply saying is putting in more effort to find the right person, or putting in some effort and approaching it that methodically, systematically, that's what I attempt to do right now. Most likely. Still need to figure out how I do it, but this is directionally correct how I try to approach it. And I found it very remarkable how Leila Hormozi did that, very systematic, as opposed to just ending up with the first best person. And I also understand those folks, because life could be pretty lonely, and ending a relationship, you think like, oh, I will never find someone again. I will be completely lonely for the end of my life. But that is just our monkey brains, our brains that are wired to always see the negatives, or to a large extent, to protect us. But I think that's not the case. And putting in some effort and approaching that a little bit systematically can help. And I want to share with you some of the contents, because I also created a list, and maybe that will help you as well if you're looking for a life partner. If you're looking for short-term mating, that's not the right podcast. So, foundational question, and those are really questions I ask this person, or some of those, or ask myself. What I ask the other person is, what does a happy life look like to you? So if this person tells me, hey, a happy life looks to me like having no children, traveling all the time, that's maybe something. But maybe not for me. And then you have already good expectation. Is that a fit or not? Totally without emotion, just understanding, what does a happy life look like? Like this? Oh, I think that's not right for me. And another person tells you something different, and you realize, oh, that's actually right for me. That's how I see myself in future going through life, or how a happy life looks like. Also asking the question, when or do you want to have kids? And when do you want to have kids? Is this someone who totally focuses on career and doesn't want children until they are 35, 40? Or is it someone who wants children with already being 25? And then questions I ask myself is, could I marry her and spend the rest of my life with her? And somehow, I think a lot of human beings, most of us, we have some sensors here on our, somewhere in our mind, that can detect whether we actually want to spend more time with this person. And therefore, I really like in-person conversations, because then you can pretty fast see, oh, is that something, or no, I don't want to spend time with that person. So could I marry her and spend the rest of my life with her? And it's hard to assess, obviously, after the first date, but sometimes actually not. And that question could, At least that's how I try to attempt it. And then another one is, does having this person in my life increase or decrease the likelihood of reaching my goals? Obviously, that's something is a presumption. I presume that it's like a forecast when you're not in a relationship. But it's worth. I think it's worth asking. Yeah, is it easier with that person to achieve my goals or our goals together? And also, when being in a relationship, we can ask ourselves, if you find yourself being in a relationship, ask yourself, did my personal stats go up? Like, am I more healthy? Am I more happy? Am I more wealthy? And an important thing here when it comes to those questions I want to say here, which I think is quite important. Jordan Peterson once got asked, or I think many times got asked, actually many times on his events, giving speeches, like, how do I find the right life partner or the person I spend the rest of my life with? And it was quite hard to him to answer that question. And after a certain period, he realized the reason why it's hard because it's a stupid question. Why it's a stupid question? Because you should flip the question. How do I become a desirable person that someone else is attracted to? That's the better question. How do I build up myself as a person who other people are looking for? And then you can always focus on those things you are looking for in the other person, but first try to make you great, and then the rest comes after. I found it quite helpful. So we covered some questions. That's the first part of my list, foundational questions. I ask myself or the other person. The second thing is the requirements. It sounds a little bit technical, but I listed out how many things, 22 things that are very important to me. And you can do the same. And it takes a little bit brain power. And first you dump that down, just, okay, important to me is that the other person is being loyal, etc., etc. And then once you've did your brain dump, putting everything on paper, you start to create a hierarchy you prioritize. And then you have maybe top 3, top 4 items of things that are very, very important to you. Foundational. Those things the other person need to meet, like do or be. And then you have things that are less important. Maybe like in a rank, it's rank 15, 16, 17. Those are not that important. It's a nice to have, but if the other person doesn't do that or doesn't have this requirement, it's not that important. Another part of that list is non-negotiables. I put that into a separate section. Unacceptable things. Things I clearly don't want to have in the other person. And that helps me. Like, there are some really big red flags, and I have them already in my brain. But for me, it was important to bring that on paper and know what are those non-negotiables, because I forget them perhaps. And the last thing, and again, remember the Jordan Peterson story I just mentioned, my own downsides. Being transparent about stuff you do that are maybe non-negotiables, and a lot of people don't like them. I think Alex Ramosi covered that. For him, non-negotiable is he works a lot and he crushes the gym regularly. That's what he does, and that is non-negotiable to him. And being upfront with those things and setting the expectation, that's what I attempt to do. That the other person, this woman, knows what they can expect and what they can't expect. And if that's not a fit for her, totally fine. No emotions. We are just not the right fit. And there is someone who fulfills all those requirements and who is my unicorn. And for the other person, their unicorn. And that's the beautiful thing. It's just like, hey, we just have different expectations of life. And that's okay if you find yourself in that situation, I believe. There's always someone who is exactly, or to a large extent, made for you. I'm not saying perfectly. As we know, no one is perfect, but yeah. This list gives me some kind of a direction, what I'm looking for. And I thought sharing that with you. In terms of dating and relationships, I also thought about, okay, I want to find a life partner. Life partner sounds a little bit, a wife, let's put it like that. I want to find a wife, the wife I spend the rest of my life with. And there are different approaches how to find a woman. And I'm now talking from my perspective. If you're a woman, maybe you're looking for a man. And what are the approaches? How can we find that person? And I recently watched a podcast episode on the Ice Coffee Hour with Blaine Anderson. The title of this episode is Dating Expert: Why 90% of Men Will Never Get a Girlfriend. Do this instead. Kind of recommend. It was quite interesting. And they also covered their online dating versus cold approaching or meeting person or approaching people in real life. And because I'm someone, I've never been on a dating app like those names, I've never been on any of those platforms. I don't know nothing, not nothing, but I heard from people what's going on there, but I have never been on those platforms. And I found myself, okay, how do I do that now best? And I think I came to the conclusion to a large extent, and maybe I will still try that out once if there's a good dating app out there. I'm not saying I will not do that, but I think approaching people in real life. So if I'm in the gym and I see a woman, like, hey, this woman looks good, I go over and say, I introduce myself. Why not? And that's actually how people used to do that early on. But nowadays it's for a lot of people way more convenient to do everything online because, yeah, obviously life is set out to do everything online, whether it's ordering food. Some people watch all the time porn. You can get your dosage of woman through those websites. Everything is more convenient. But cold approaching is harder, but I think you get already a decent understanding if the other person is someone you want to talk with. And it's a little bit scary, but actually now working in sales helps me because I do a lot of cold outreaches, cold calls. So maybe I can use some of the learnings I got it there also now when it comes to finding a woman. So yeah, that's basically the cold approaching versus online dating, meeting people in real life, approaching them. I think although the approaching people in real life is a little bit harder, I think I will try to do that, maybe also online, but let's see. For now, I'm more a fan of real life conversations. Another thing I learned in this podcast episode I mentioned before is fall in love with the girl, not with the institution. Put simply, love the person, not the idea of being married. I found that also, I don't know how I should now categorize that or what to really say about that. Just found it an interesting insight. Make sure first that the person you're with, the person is great for you and you are great to them. And then you can think about the rest of marriage and all that kind of stuff, which I see big value in it. Don't understand me wrong. So I covered that before in my list. Like, do you want children? How does a happy like that? Those are things that are crucial, obviously. But first, the groundwork is that you and I are a good match. We are a good fit. You're the partner in crime to me. Yeah. Found that helpful. All this to say that being a little bit more methodical, systematic about how to find someone you're going to spend the rest of your life with is maybe something worth considering. And I'm talking here to myself. And I think there's decent, solid evidence that, or let's put it like that, the person you spend the most time with in your life is not your parents, it is not your siblings, brother, your sister. It's your wife, it's your partner or your man. And I think there's a stat out there, you can look it up. Like, everything decreases time spent with those other people, but time spent with your partner obviously is always high. It's the most important person in your life. So therefore, putting in some effort may be something worth considering. And again, I'm talking to myself here. Also, we talked about dating, cold approaching. Yeah, I found it interesting. And yeah, the last thing we covered is love the person, not the idea of being married. First, do the groundwork. Hope that's helpful for you guys. All right, that's all I wanted to cover today. Now, as a thank you, or let me quickly think if I covered everything, because those are quite deep topics. Yeah. Yeah, I think we covered everything. Yeah. Finding a life partner is quite a big topic, quite a deep topic, but I thought it's worth sharing. So yeah, I forgot maybe some things, but for now that's fine. Maybe I will cover more in another episode. All right. So if you listen till the end, as a little gift for you, I created a list of the top 100 plus podcast episodes from other shows which I enjoyed the most listening. Like, you will also see there my top 10 all-time favorites podcast episodes on wealth, health, relationships, life in general, and spent quite a significant time listening to those episodes and creating that list. So hopefully you will like it. Just click the link down below and grab the list, and you will get also signed up to my newsletter as well if you try to download that list. So yeah, hope you like it. And on this note, I also have a newsletter. It's free. It's weekly, shared on Sunday. Similar what I'm doing in this episode, my thoughts, ideas, reflections, learnings, content I consumed, like podcast episode, maybe a book, maybe a quote, whatever. I share everything there. That's interesting to you. Just do the same as mentioned before, get the list, and you get signed up as well. All right, guys, bye.